Okay, we are all yours.
Hello, everyone. I will be very honest right now. This is my first one, so I'm very nervous and anxious. So it might take me a few minutes to settle into doing this at all. But thank you for being here. I'm honored to be here and very grateful to Raffaella for the invitation and Kate Park, who also made this connecting happen from my last show that I will finish off with. Um, what do I start with? Uh, my name's Parker
You may.
McComb. I moved. Thank you. I moved here from New York City in 2018. I just had my eighth anniversary of living in Seoul, Korea, 2 days ago. Um, uh, the first question that I get after the like a conversation is, "How did you end up in Seoul?" And I'll be very honest, I have a lot of friends where I graduated from Parsons, and they ended up moving back here to Korea. And so I was very influenced and understood culturally and food, language, not so much. I'm still struggling, but I get by. I survive here. But I just knew a lot, and I felt like I had an understanding in the way culture is here. I grew up in a very Christian conservative household um, from Florida originally, and that will make sense when I explain it a little bit later. But I like rules, and I think that's why it felt very familiar here when I came. And I was just coming to visit friends at first, but then I came and I started to freelance and work a little bit and see if I could live here. I was in a relationship for a very long time back in New York, so I was kind of juggling both. After a few months here, I went to New York to, you know, nurture that relationship. And then at the end of the day, I got dumped. And that really pushed me forward to, I was like, fuck it, I'm moving to Korea. I was doing really well there already, and I have no, like, my life just blew up in front of my face. Um, it was, and I moved here. And that was like the best decision. Like, the silver lining was that I'm able to sit here and talk to all of you right now and share my practice. And I think that is how I look at life and um, how I found my way back to my practice as an artist. Because I definitely had abandoned it for a few years after college. And, the breakup was the catalyst to drive me forward and coming here and like rededicating myself to what I think my purpose is. I titled this Artist Talk Empathesis because I like to make up words between two other words. And I think a lot of my work is about empathy. All my work, I think, ties back to relationships and empathy. And so this is my thesis on empathy and kind of, I don't feel like I practiced empathy until I got dumped. Like, I became a little bit more selfless through that experience, and I'm really grateful for it. And I think living in a new country, is it really shapes you and informs you. And that's what's happened here. And I've definitely learned over this experience, the last 8 years. The first 3 years from 2018 when I landed to around this time in 2021, I met a lot of people. I went out a lot. I didn't decline any invitation. I was just very social, I became an extrovert, which I'm not, to be honest. And I just met a lot of people and I had a really great time. And I, had a lot of fun. I shot here and there and made work here and there, but I didn't kind of lock in until this show came about, which was a friend from Parsons. She had a cafe out in Hongdae, and I just stopped by because I heard that she had had it. And we just had a conversation from there, and I kind of was still going 3 years later through the breakup and kind of picking up the pieces of myself and trying to put them back together. And she understood that, and I feel like, understands darkness the same way I do. And I have a series, an identity series, which is a mask series, which you'll see in a second. But this was my first invitation to do a show here in Korea, and it was called we came up with Facing Identities. And it was the first time I showed all mask work, it was me, it was an opportunity for me to make work and um, work through my emotions with moving to a new country and just like my identity as a queer person and coming comfortable with myself. This is one of the first photos. This is a self-portrait. This is my house in Bogwangdong, which is about to be demolished and will be gentrified and built up upon later. But I don't, a lot of these, I don't say they're self-portraits, but they are because I use my own body as like a vessel to kind of create these works. But I don't, I feel like if I put my face in them, that's a little egotistical and also too vulnerable for me. So I do think the mask works as this catalyst of hiding, of showing one's identity with by concealing it in a way. I think with showing our face, we depend on it so much to be recognized by our phones, by other people. But I think there's so much more to us than what is here. And so um, once we erase it essentially and make it void, it's like what other parts of the environment that you're surrounding yourself with are defining factors of you and an expression of you. Um, these were all that photo previously, and these photos were all made for this show specifically, and kind of because I was invited to do a show and I knew that I had a space to show. That's when I really start making work, and I like to have a goal in mind. Like I like to work towards something and share it with people. And that's why I started making all of these works specifically. A lot of them are I'll go down the line. The first one with the flower is called Wildflower, and there is a Korean artist um, who he sings a ballad that is about a flower that you have to let go in order to come back to you. Um, and that's if you listen to the lyrics, you'll understand. And or like they just really spoke to me and I understood. And I was like, I really have to let go of this person who, if I ever wanted them to come back to me, which I don't, because I'm perfectly fine on my own and as a singular person. And I think that was just a way of letting go. The second photo is me squashing tomatoes because I had a lot of resentment and I also don't like tomatoes. I like tomato sauce. I like pizza. I just use tomatoes. I think red is a very powerful color. And that was how I expressed my resentment towards um, uh, like something that was around me um, in that way, something that I could show it without squishing that person's heart themselves. The third photo is called Ego, and I think is like the strongest photo that I've made to date in 2021. And I'll tell you a little bit about it later on. But I think the ego is something that gets it outsmarts ourselves. So there's an octopus here in the chest, and I think an octopus has nine brains and three hearts, I believe, if I'm quoting that correctly. But it's such a smart and shape-shifting being species, and I think I kind of relate to that because I feel like I'm constantly shape-shifting to exist on this planet. I think our ego is like a way to protect ourselves. I think ego gets a bad rep. I think that's why what I really wanted to touch on is that, oh, the ego is so egotistical. Like there's such a negative connotation around it. And I'm like, actually, no, there's also duality to it where it's like there to protect you. And it's not this negative, just this negative. There's not just a negative side to it. Like I think there's both. Um, and I'll get back to that later. The fourth photo is um regardless, and that was all of these. A lot of these are based off songs. Like I'm always listening to music, whether it's the lyrics, whether it's the melody, the sound, whatever it is. But regardless is really I'll have your back. I have my own back actually, is how I feel. And like you can like just because someone doesn't have your back doesn't mean regardless doesn't mean you have to abandon them. I think that's what I was saying there. And then Veil is much more about a camouflage. I come from a fashion background in New York. It's a very intense industry, and I learned a lot from it. But I don't think it's not for me. I do think there's a lot of egos in the fashion industry, but this photo is an homage to kind of having to blend into certain scenarios in order to protect yourself and get by. But yeah, it's an homage to my to fashion, fashion editorials. This is just fun. Me and my friend, this is all a friend of mine. He made all of the costumes, and he just this is all in New York, and he just knew how to have fun with it and believed in this. There's not a deeper meaning to this. This is just playfulness, and I think that is it's like you know being young and dressing up. It's like the same, playing dress up. I don't know if you did that. I definitely did that as like a young queer kid. Not that like my parents were loving that, but it happened, and I think I kind of had my friend illustrate this and gave him free reign, and he just was down to go. He's like, I don't care if my face is in or not. He just knew because he also comes from a fashion background, and I mean, this mask is taken from Maison Margiela. I think it's very obvious, but that is what it was born out of. And I mean, I'm a diehard Margiela fan and will always will be. So I definitely took that and brought it into my work in a way to conceal the identities of my models, but more importantly, the identity of myself. In 2019, I went to LA and my friend was pregnant. And for some reason, I was drawn to take a photograph of her because I think when you make a child, you give birth, you bear a child. It's not something I can ever experience. I have lots of sisters. I'm surrounded by women, and I'm very lucky to be an uncle like 10 times over. But I think it's something that I appreciate and I respect a lot. And I think it's something that when you have a child, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I feel like you're not only giving new life to yourself, but you're making a lot of sacrifice. And I don't think I'm that selfless, but I respect women and have so much an appreciation for that. For my mothers, I have a stepmother and a biological mother, and I have four sisters, and they've all had children, and I just feel like I wanted to pay respect to them, even though I didn't make images of my sisters when they were pregnant. These are the people that are very close to me, and I continue to make this work as my friends start having children. Um, and yeah, I think there's just like a rebirth in the person who gives life to the new life. I use my friends a lot as my models, if not myself. And this is a couple friend of mine who've really nurtured me and listened to me and been my therapist while living here abroad. And I mean, it's not very common in Korea to have home cooked meals and like a family, like a household to host and have people over. But these people have like countless times like cooked for me and listened to me and just been there for me. And she recently gave birth to two twins. And so this was 2021, but last year, December 2025, she gave birth to twins. And I really wanted to include her in, of course, into this series that I have ongoing of this pregnancy series that I feel like is a thing in itself and I think will grow, but it will be like a lifelong series, like sub series in the Mask series, because I feel like the Mask series will also never end for me. Um, it's just like my forever series, and then sub series live within that. These are through travels, and this kind of became a hotel series. In transient spaces is what I was focusing on, and how I can exist in these environments and know that someone has existed here before and will exist after I do. Um, and I work a lot on intuition, I would say. I don't always ask and understand myself what the work is about right then and there. I kind of let the work lead itself at first, and then I'll understand later. I think it's like believing your subconscious and just kind of going with it. And then you don't have to understand everything 100% of the time immediately. I think it's impossible and it creates just a headache for me, to be honest. And like, um, it takes time. These are in different, I'll explain that one is in the Philippines, one is in Jeju Island, and one is here in Seoul. And that ties into the different spaces and different cities that these were taken in. This one specifically is called Sanctuary, and this was taken in Vietnam. This was my first kind of solo trip that I planned myself, and I was really on my own and I had so much fun. But I feel like I take a lot of these images in bed because the bed is a sanctuary for me. I have a lot of anxieties. It's just like a safe space where I can dream, where I can sleep, where I can rest. I'm someone who needs, like, I will probably need 3 days of sleep after this because it just takes a lot of energy out of me to be vulnerable and like open and talking about this kind of stuff. And that's why I end up kind of making these bed images because I think bed is such a like ritual sanctuary kind of place for me to rest and recover and replenish my battery life and my social battery. Even if it's like staring at the wall, I need that time for myself to do so. And I think this is just to pay respects to that kind of ritual for me. This is kind of an in-between series that I did. I have a deck of cards here that I worked with Yummy Colors, which is a creative agency back in New York. We go back to invitation where I mean, I do apply myself to open calls and stuff like that, but there are times where people will approach me or I'm invited through somebody else to do some kind of project like this. Yummy Colors, why concept of the year is the title, but Yummy Colors leads this project. And I did this series simultaneously while doing the mass series for Facing Identities, and it really pushed me to kind of like detach, like make work even more so without thinking about it. I mean, Facing Identities really had an emotional tethering to it, but this was a little bit more playful, and I got to swim in the Han River, which I wouldn't recommend. But I really wanted to make this image, and I just feel like the color palette and everything is very. I was finding my way to my color palette, I think, and I was also like exploring myself and expressing myself. Because I was kind of, I mean, it's called liminal being is, and it was just like I was still going through this state of in between while living here in Korea. Floor Gallery. If you don't know it, please look it up and get familiar with it because it's a beautiful space, and I just found them on Instagram. I don't know, like, you know, the algorithm, and they were hosting open calls, and I just started to apply, and they were very receptive to my work when applying. And I've had multiple shows with not solo shows, but group exhibitions with them, and um, because I had images from Facing Identities, I was able to apply with already printed and framed stuff. And it makes it much easier when you have stuff on hand to apply for opportunities. So if you're an artist, I really suggest just having it printed and framed and ready because opportunities like this happen really quickly. There's a new image in this one specifically. And it's with the disco ball. I constantly photograph disco balls, but I'm not going to go on a rant about that. I'll just keep going, but I love a disco ball. This is Places Belong. This is very different from my Mask series, but and I kind of stopped doing this series, but um it's just to show that my ongoing relationship with Floor and appreciation and their support over these years because it's not just one type of work that they're looking for. They kind of curate different they give a theme and then you apply for it with whatever work you think suits it and that you want to show. And this was not printed. And I had to have it printed and it's on a Diasec frame. And I've never printed anything like this, but I'm very happy with it. Like, I'm glad I got to show work outside of what I'm always pushing, which is the Mask series. And I feel like this also speaks to kind of my surrealistic approach to making work. I'm very grateful because I think they're very supportive, gave me the courage and kind of what's the word? Courage. Yeah, they gave me the courage, support. They gave me the push. Just like I think the people that I've been surrounded with in Seoul, I think believe in my work, and I don't think I believed in it myself. So at first, now I do. Now I'm maybe too confident. No, but now I believe myself because other people around me believed in me, and I think that is really important to surround yourself with people like that because it's tough um, to do it on your own. I think I can do everything myself, but that's absolutely not true. And I've learned to let people help me rather than thinking that I can do it all on my own. This is Ripple Effect, which is I have a copy back behind. under that painting behind you. And they showed this book because they had a hidden library show. They do a lot of publication support. I self-published this book with my best friend, Annie Kim of Default Mode. And I later got to show this publication at their space because they were doing this themed book. And I've done a lot of book fairs with them, and they've included me in book fairs and invited me. This all goes back to invitation and how I'm invited to participate in these things, and that is a action of empathy, I think, by being invited. And I think that's really important to note. Ripple Effect was also an invitation to publish it. I mean, I self-published it, but my best friend Annie, who used to live here, she's back in Shanghai now. She is a very talented friend of mine, and she asked me a few times, she's like, "Oh, why don't you do something? You have so much work that's not seen." And I was like, I'll just like brush it off like a few times. Like she asked me a few times, like over like a few years. And then she asked me again and something clicked. And I was like, fuck it. Yeah. Okay, let's do it. And then we just started it. And I just sent her images and she did the complete layout. And there was a lot of back and forth. And it took a year from start to finish, from that initial conversation to delivering her things and adding more photos. But this publication is a love letter to anybody who's feeling lost in the direction. I think at that time I was at a turning point, and this publication was a release for me of like, oh, I know my direction. I just need to move on. Like let there's 110 images in this book, and they're from a span of 19 years of work, from I think as soon as I was as young as 15 years old when I was in middle school to 2023 or 2023. And there's Polaroids. It's all film images. I mean, I've been shooting since I was 14 or 15 in high school using a Canon AE1 and a digital camera. I was kind of like that purist who was like, oh, it's not photography if it's not film photography. I've since let go of that, and I do film and digital imagery, but um, the color was really important to me. I think Annie asked me why that color, and I was like, it just makes me happy. That color just brings me joy, and just looking at it brightens my mood, and um, that's why I had to choose it. I was like, it was nothing more simple than that, but I think that's what it had to be. It was kind of okay, let's move on from all my experiences and like move into the next phase is what it felt like. And it was also this invitation and support of um, what will come next. I like and finding my direction and kind of trusting myself after this. Here are a few spreads, and there's not a lot of people in this book. It's a lot of like objects, still life, scenes from all over the world that my travels, like New York, I'm like seeing New Jersey, Arizona, the Great Grand Canyon, underneath the Han River, um, all over. Then after I did a book launch, and it felt I was like very proud of it, and it felt I feel like I succeeded at that. Like I feel like um I don't know, I felt very proud because I did it with like one of my really good friends, and it's exactly how I wanted it to be and how she wanted it to be. And I think it was very collaborative, and it just felt right. But weeks after after I released that, people came up to me and were like, "What's next? What are you working on?" And I was like, "What the fuck?" I was like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted." I was like, "I'm drained. Like I can't just push myself into the next thing." Like I get, to be honest, very depressed after a big project. That's why I have to sit in my bed and stare at a wall for a very long time to regenerate. And that's just what happens. But slowly but surely, a few months later, um, I went to Paris for Art Basel, and I visited friends there, some are in this room, and I went to see the Surrealist show at the museum there, and was really inspiring, and it helped. It kind of like ignited this spark in me, and like what the direction that I wanted to go. And so when I kind of crashed and burned after I got back from Paris, But I was like, I can't keep feeling bad for myself. You need to pick yourself at one point, you need to pick yourself back up and you just need to go for it and just one foot in front of the other without seeing whatever is in front of you. So I started to exercise and run along the Han River, which is one of my favorite things to do here in Seoul, and run to the flower market and gather flowers and whatever flower spoke to me, I picked up that day. And then I started going to the wet markets and pick up shells and and food. Essentially, I mean, I eat eggs every day, and that I think the crack of the egg really also sparked this kind of fascination of every crack that I do is completely different. And that's kind of how the fragility of our humanness is, I think, and like being vulnerable. And I think, I don't know, cracking, whatever, 3 or 4 eggs every morning and just kind of being fascinated by that and like spending time putting them back together and then eventually just throwing them away afterwards. I just became so fascinated with them and just I feel like that it just became a representation of like how I felt when I came to Korea. But it's like you can put yourself back together, but the cracks will always be there. This series just kind of put one foot in front of the other, and I created a framework for myself, which was go run to the markets, collect whatever you want. Even if you don't use it right away, you can have kind of like a materials shelf of stuff to work with. And the whole series kind of became the cycle of life, like birth, life, death, decay. I was really interested in um, this cycle of life and what it represents. And I didn't know at the time, but it will lead to the show after this that I'll explain. Um, I think it's this, I made this back in 2021, and this was included in this show. The show is called Liminal Paradise, Still Life is a Surreal Dream. Valentina Buzzi, she helped me curate it and do the text for it, and also a very supportive friend and makes so much sense of the work that I do. Has been able to make so much work. I think I don't like speaking, I don't like writing, I'm not a words person. Definitely a visual language person, and that's what I'm going to stick to. And I'm going to trust the curators and friends that I have around me to put into words what I cannot, because I'm not well read or well written like that. And I know that, and that's fine. But she helped me conceptualize this. She had the idea for draping these large scale fabric pieces that we suspended in the space. And this was one with 131 Gallery. And I didn't think of it at the time when I was approached to do this show. This gallery, 131 Gallery, invited me to do this solo show. I didn't realize what kind of undertaking it was when I accepted it, because it was a much larger space than I had anticipated. And it was a great experience. I learned so much, and I'm really happy that I did it, but damn, did I learn. I learned a lot, and it was a lot of like physical just impact and emotional and psychological impact, because I can't, like, if I'm making a series and working on a series, but then this came uh I want to highlight that I just started making this series without having a show in mind, and then as I was making this show, as I was making that series, the invitation came to me, and I think that's what it's all about, and kind of just trusting and flow. We talked about this earlier this morning, but yeah, I think just this is when I feel like flow really started, and kind of just trusting that making work um, will lead to the next thing. And the draped fabrics of this size, I was using white canvases as my backdrop for the still lifes, and so I wanted to mimic the draping of the actual images with the works themselves. And I love photography, but it is a little it's very two-dimensional, and I really like, even since I was at Parsons and doing my thesis, I was really interested in a three-dimensional object and making something that was more tangible and not just flat and hung on the wall. I wanted it to exist a bit differently, and this had a fluidity to it. And this was kind of my first time in Seoul, with the help of Valentina, kind of like pushing that forward and kind of understanding what the iteration in like language of the next phase of my work. This work is called Divination. I think this was one of the most successful pieces. It is digital, it's not film. Usually when I shoot, I'm shooting both digital and film and Polaroid, because I cannot help myself because I want to see all of the results. And I feel like each format has a very different feeling. But I think this was like the most impactful and powerful, and this people responded to it the most, and I think it feels like the most heavenly to me. And then people started to see different things, but um, for me, it's important to continue making the work even if you don't want to, because this day specifically, I remember specifically, like I pluck the flowers. I have the flowers in my house, but like obviously they're dying in my house, and I don't have so much time to work with them. But that day, I remember specifically, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I was like, I don't want to shoot. I was like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I felt very, I don't know. I just didn't want to. I was just not in the mood. But I was like, okay, the materials are here. I hate wasting materials. That's my biggest thing. But the flowers would have gone to waste if I not had made this image. So I was like, okay, just push yourself to make it. And I mean, the results pretty damn good, I think. I'm really happy with this. And a lot of the audience was really happy with this and responded really well. And yeah, I'm just very lucky to have pushed myself. So just, remind yourself to keep going. I buy materials and then they sit there for a very long time, but because they're organic, um, they're organic, or they die. They decay in my space, and that's probably not the healthiest. But I love the beauty. I love the reality of life that this shows, because life is not always beautiful. But I do think, and I think that's the kind of like the beauty of, maybe I'm a bit melancholic, where I like the darkness, and I like kind of I think beauty and like the the light shines the brightest in the dark spaces, and I think that's what this is a metaphor for. So that's what all of these images are a metaphor for. So I think just remember that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think to remind yourself that, and just I tell myself now that every decision is the right decision, even if you don't, the outcome may not be exactly, or the road along the way might not be what you expected. At least you're like learning and working and experiencing through that. And I think that is what life is all about. And that's kind of um, what's led me to make this work, and kind of, like I said before, I don't really always know exactly what I'm saying when I'm making the work. I'm intuitively working and composing the images together, and then the meaning will find itself. Will find me. The meaning will find me a bit later sometimes. This was another iteration of more three-dimensional objects. This is kind of my first found object that I was obsessed with, that I wanted to bring new life and meaning into. I live in this neighborhood called Bogwangdong, which is about to be redeveloped, and I actually am going to move out next week, and it will be demolished. So everybody is throwing away their belongings and trashing them, and they'll go to a landfill. But this was sitting outside my house maybe for like a year, and I just loved the color. I was just so obsessed with the color, and I don't know. I felt weird about taking it off the street, but I was like, "Ugh, it's been there for a year and nobody's taken it and nobody's trashed it." I was like, okay, I feel like this is meant for me. Like, it's been a year. Like, I think it's, I can't deny it anymore. So finally I picked it out off the street. There was like this kind of cream backing to it, very like I guess probably like an 80s or 90s situation. But I ripped the back off. I implemented like a black acrylic. So there was more of like a darkness to it and contrast to it. And then there was a cracked egg. I placed like a decayed banana in there. There's a chalice, a broken chalice, basically things that are cracked, decayed, and essentially trash. But I think I find beauty in these things that other people like dismiss of. And I think it iterates the cracks that we have within our lives, and we just keep going. And this is like a subconscious thing, like like a chest of um I have a fascination with like chests, like treasure chests and chests in general. I like to compartmentalize things, my emotions, my works, series works, and I think that's kind of an iteration of what this is, and kind of my hopes and dreams. Um, these I made. I think this keeps going. Disco ball. And I think this was just like a playful way to do abstract works, and lend itself into the surrealism, like the surrealistic work and like kind of like dreamscape that is my world of my visual language and my work. Here are some more pieces of, I think these are a bit more sexual, is what people, but I feel like they were more of a nesting, and um, this was just all, a routine of going and running, exercising, running to the flower market and back. But this whole show was, you see um, the draped fabric, which is symbolic of an ocean of feelings for me. Uh, I consider water and the ocean as like a metaphor for how we deal with our emotions, because it's like water is an amorphic substance, and it can be gas, it can be solid, it can be ice, it can be very fluid, and I think that's how I deal with my emotions and my feelings. And you can't really control them all the time. Like there are circumstances that harden these feelings and evaporate these feelings, and they come in and out like tides. And that's what this white fabric is symbolic of. Um, it's also, I'm referencing like Dutch still life paintings, and I think the white canvas, is also a reference to those paintings. Photography has like a big argument about whether it's fine art or not, in the art world. And I teach photo as well. And the first class that I have with students is always, there's a difference between making a photo and taking a photo. And that's how I've been able to differentiate and kind of split my brain when I work for clients versus when I work for myself. Because I think I approach photography like I'm painting. That's how I feel. Like I'm controlling what's in front of the camera. I'm controlling how it's set up, the lighting scenario. I shot this one specifically in Shanghai. This kind of goes back to the hotel series with the mask, is that I started after doing a lot of still life work in Seoul. When I started to travel to Hong Kong and Shanghai, I started to go to their markets and in that city and collect what was kind of what's easily available, and what people use to like feed themselves, as I think is really important, and it's also symbolic of the cycle of life. So still life paintings, the canvas backdrop, it's referencing the canvases that painters paint on, and that's a little bit of my like argument for whether whether photography is fine art or not. These were also in the show, and a darker take. This is Ocean Calling and Throne, and I think this goes back. These touch back on my love for the ocean, and Throne felt more of like in this heavenly realm. Kind of this egg felt like it had some kind of power to it, and it was like it's rested and nested in this throne, and um, they're just fun, dark. How I see, I was painting with this was kind of an experiment, but I think they were quite successful. I think that's a thing. When I approached this still life series, I told myself, I was like, these are not set in stone. I looked at them as these are studies, like a sketchbook. I didn't approach them with like they need to have this heavy meaning, and like these are meant for a show. Later, they became meant for a show, but I think it took the pressure off of me when making the work, that I didn't like hyper fixate on anything, and I just really trusted my intuition and kind of like my subconscious of like how I was putting together and making the work, without even looking at yes, this references Dutch still lifes, but I wasn't sitting there at my computer sifting through Dutch still lifes. I think when I was at Parsons, I nearly failed out of art history both of my semesters because I'm not a textbook learner at all. And it was a 9 a.m. class, and I'm also not a morning person. But I'm understanding that this obviously influenced those classes influenced how I make work and how I it's like a memory to me, and how it's like influenced the work that I do now without even knowing it. And like much later, like it's maybe like 15 years later, that I'm using these references into my work. This is my first kind of this is also found objects and reinterpreting them and creating and breathing new life into them. from my neighborhood. These also sat outside for a few months and they were weathered over snow, heat, uh, rain, the dryness, the cold. So they definitely sat out there for a while, but I didn't place them there. I simply like picked them up from where they were and I took them into my house and I dusted them off and I taped them up back up a little bit and glued them here and there and like attached the imagery. But I just used existing frames and reiterated them to host and be a vessel for the new images that I was making. And I just think they're very beautiful because there's a history to them, there's an experience to them, they've lived a life, and I just wanted to share that with them. It's I'll get to it later, but I'll keep going. But that's what this was kind of like my first attempt of doing this. I don't think I completely had it figured out what I was doing with these frames, and even I rework them today. But I think it was taking that chance of doing something that's like I'm not so familiar with because it's not so straightforward photography. It is more of like working with an object and reinterpreting it and into something new. These are some objects that I made. I started to make objects, also found that's a light bulb, that's a shell, which I don't know where I got from. But I just took the bulb from work and I had this. I got the shell from the Philippines, to be honest. But I'm just making work that I've things that I've had for a year that just sit on my shelf or like sit at my desk at work. And then I'm like, oh, how do these fit together? It's kind of like an epiphany moment where I just see things and eventually I'm like, oh, it's just like building, like a puzzle. That's how I kind of this whole show was. It was definitely like a puzzle and figuring out and trial and error, like figuring out what I wanted to do with my practice and kind of experiment and be okay with that. These images are an extension of the still life. These were made in my home here in Seoul, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. So I think that just should leave an impression in kind of what where these I think it gives you more context of where these are made and like what is available at these in these countries, in these cities, and how the environment that you're in heavily influences the work that I make. Um, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Um, this is a hyperconscious lamp. This series is a photographic series, but I really just wanted the lamp for myself in my home as an object. There, but I didn't want it to be like an iteration of something that I've already saw completely. So it was like, how do I kind of impose and like iterate my work into this lamp bottle? So I use a series that it's a digital image series, but it's also taken in various locations around the world, whether it's LA, the Philippines, New York City, here, but they're all abstracted works. And then I just had them printed on, similarly to printed on fabric. And then I had somebody else assemble like I drilled a hole into the bottle and I had somebody else assemble them because um, I'm not that handy. I'm handy, but like I'm not an electrician. So I left it to a factory to configure it together. And this was like another kind of experiment in figuring out my way to object-based works. Hydro Halo is my most recent exhibition that Kate Part here in the back. She curated and it works from my last series, the Liminal Paradise series. I think heavily influenced. If you saw at the beginning, there were like these shells hanging in the background, but I felt like that work wasn't fully realized, and it didn't come exactly to life the way it just wasn't finished. It was up, but it wasn't finished. I imagine it on a much larger scale, what large scale is to me, and what was seven in the last show, which was seven, what I now call Aqua Angels, became 115 Aqua Angels, which are scallop shells and peacock feathers assembled to um, to be my little creatures. I feel like this is um, exactly what I wanted. And like I approached Kate to show at this. I was like just inquiring. I was like, oh, this gallery that you introduced me to that we've been to a few times. I was like, um, do they take proposals? Like, like how does it work? I'm kind of new to the not so much anymore, but I'm still learning how to navigate how to introduce yourself for an opportunity for a show. Like a lot of my opportunities have been invitations, um, but you need to start the conversation somewhere if you're interested. I knew this space. I was drawn to this space. The big window was really what called me, and it felt like after the Liminal Paradise, the scale of that was so big and very um, exhausting. I think this was more approachable for the scale that I wanted to show this work in. So I asked her. It worked out. I applied to an open call that they had, and we had a meeting. And I didn't know what to expect, but it all fell into place. And I really thank the gallery owner of Combined Works in Bukchon Village, and it led to me finishing and making this body of work that is uh, revolved around marine life and what's under the sea and water as a subject matter. Um, this was shot in 2023, but I framed it from a if anybody knows Dongun Market, the secondhand market here in Korea. I just purchased very cheaply this frame, and this is kind of like these found objects, and uh, this is when it really got good, I think. And finding these frames off the street and reinterpret using my images and using these like deteriorated and decaying frames from my neighborhood that will be demolished soon, and I think it really suits my work, and this kind of pay, play, pays homage to my last show, Liminal Paradise, and just pushing it forward. That is a like a salmon roe egg, and going on with this. This was an experiment. This also resembles waves, body of water crashing up. This is glass, but it would be rocks on a shore. But I like this more three-dimensional take on the frame, and I would like to continue this. I feel like this is the beginning of a series that I will start. And this kind of leans into the hyper conscious and reinterpreting these abstract images into more three-dimensional works. This is well found objects. I had kept these. Everything around Hydro Halo is an homage to my time here in Korea, I think, and I think in my childhood. Specifically, these pieces I used to scallop when I was that was like my summer trip as a family. We would go scalloping. When I first found the scallops here in Korea, I thought they were so beautiful, and I just started to collect them, even though it's like a very easy go out to eat food at like a seafood restaurant here, and they're just considered waste. Like they don't collect them, they don't keep them, they throw them out. But I was just like so enamored by the colors of them, and I didn't understand why. I mean, they're very beautiful colors, but I didn't understand why specifically that this shell. But then as I started making the work, it dawned on me that I used to go scalloping when I was a child, in the summertime, and you know, not hunt for them, forage for them in the seaweed and collect them myself, and then we would shuck them and like have them for food uh, as a family. So it's just like a very fun time, and like it's just I realized I like found my way back to my childhood, like playtime, like my playground. Exactly. That's what this whole show is about. It's really about um, exploring the memories of my own memories and kind of trusting myself and doing what I really love versus what I think other people might like. And that's how all of these shells and came about. This piece is very important because I made it in 2021 along with, you can see here, with the ego image. So this work is called Heart to Back, Back to Heart. And I made this at the same time that I made the ego image, but I've never shown it. And I thought it was like a good cherry on top kind of situation. This is also in Korean, it's called mongge, which is called a sea squirt or a sea pineapple in English. And it's also food, but it for me, it's like a visual representation. I hide behind symbolism and metaphor without throughout my work because it's scary to be vulnerable. Uh, but it always, to me, it was a heart. It always resembled a heart. It's like outside of the seafood restaurants, and that's this. this is very much heart to back to heart is like even if someone turns their back to you, like I was able to find my way back to my own self. This goes back to the breakup. This was kind of like this is like me moving through my feelings of my breakup and at the time like that many years ago, but I hadn't had a chance to show it. And then I also didn't have this frame, but this kind of ties into my time here in Korea and marrying it with or like merging it with my timeline as a child. And I thought this was kind of bridging two timelines of childhood and the time that I've grown here through Korea and my artistic practice, and what kind of led me here through the catalyst that kind of drew me to or forced me more or less to Seoul. And then here in the show, I think if you walked up to the Aqua Angels, to the left would be the heart, to the right would be the ego image, and that was kind of like the duality of taking one side or the other and how they can't exist with one another. But I just wanted to place them so they have a conversation between one another that they have to exist together, whether we like it or not. Um, and I thought this was like the perfect way to showcase them and um, show the one for the first time and kind of yeah. This is this is my sculpture work, my newest sculpture work, my experimentation to sculpture work. And this glass is called Sly Glass. I used to use it also when aquarium scaping. I don't know what exactly it's called, but I used to decorate my aquariums because I used to have fish growing up, and I used to, build these kind of seascapes in the aquarium. And this was a material that I'm very drawn to, and I think is very symbolic of water, but as a solid. Um, and this is back to ego. And this is also the last iteration of an aqua angel, but this is a white aqua angel, different clam, albino peacock feather, and also slag glass, but in a different shade. But this is all kind of um, playfulness. I think it was really just me playing with materials that and like bringing sourcing materials that I had used when I was a child and sourcing materials that were available to me and that had spoken to me during my time here in Korea. And that what's is what Hydro Halo is all about is paying homage to both of those timelines and both of those realities in my lifespan at the moment. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much.